Hello everybody, Ben Rogers here, the Raptors Digest. Ryker, the news is coming in hot and heavy with the draft just around the corner, and just before we started recording this podcast, we had a Woj bomb drop. I'll play that segment. It's not about this video, but former Raptor Jonas Valanciunas is getting traded, so immediately after this, we'll react to that. Probably drop it on Courtside Digest, so keep an eye out for that if you're watching. But we have big Raptors news, and not a Woj bomb. I'll play the bomb segment again. Coming from our guy Shams from The Athletic. He's been dropping some Raptors news this offseason, but he's saying there's still mutual interest between Jarrett Allen and the Cleveland Cavaliers on a new deal, but he went out of his way to mention that the Raptors are expected to be among strong suitors for the restricted free agent this offseason. And what are your thoughts? Because we've been talking about Jarrett Allen, it feels like, all season long, Riker.
Well, we both believe he'd be a great fit for the team. True NBA big, fits with the timeline, a young guy at 22, good stats, 13 points per game, block and a half. You'd have the same hesitation or reservation as you would with any big man that we've sort of floated for the past bit, that he doesn't really have a three-point game. We don't know if he could defend well outside of the perimeter. So it leaves question marks as to, would you be able to play this guy down the stretch? Could he effectively play against small ball lineups? And the biggest caveat to this whole thing is he wants more than $100 million. So I don't know if we want to fork out that kind of money, but if we can get around those couple of things, man, this guy would be ideal for the Toronto Raptors.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of things to discuss. You brought up his points. Not the most exhilarating box sheet to look at and say, okay, this guy's on another level, but he's more in the Rudy Gobert category of players, where super long, can block shots, is a really defensive rim protector. So you're bringing him to do those sorts of things, catch lobs, dunk around the rim, and I think he's a promising jump shooter, Riker. I get flamed every time I say this on the podcast, but his form is nice. What's his free throw percentage right now?
Free throw percentage right now is not great, 70%. He shot 75% last season.
Yeah, so that's not horrid. That's not Ben Simmons level, right? So there's promising things there, and we've seen him stretch out occasionally. So I think if we can get Khem Birch shooting threes by the end of the season with just 2 months of work, if we sign him as a restricted free agent, then Nick Nurse, the coaching development staff, we just hired Earl Watson too, so shout out Earl Watson. Probably won't make a whole video on that, but might break it down in one of our lives coming up. But get that development staff in on him would be a really nice just thing to add to his game. But Riker, there's one sort of direction I want to look at this Jarrett Allen signing, because I think this is a sort of a perfect world for the Toronto Raptors. Is obviously who's picking ahead of us in this year's draft, Riker?
Yeah, we cut out on the audio, so I'm not sure what you were saying. I'm going to call you back. But in the meantime, what I'm going to do is I'm going to ramble through who else is available on the big man free agency market. Because are you back, Ben?
Yep.
Yeah, so I didn't catch what you said, but what I'm going to do is basically ramble through the big guys. Actually, can you summarize what you said in about 2 seconds? How'd you toss it back over to me? You're not responding.
I think we're back.
I'm going to go through it this way, all right?
Okay.
Didn't catch what you said.
We're back. I didn't catch what you said. You didn't catch what I said. We're good to go, though.
There's a bunch of free agents,
yeah.
All right? All of them are old. This is going to be my point, is what kind of flexibility do you have if not to pursue? And I'm starting to get the sneaking suspicion you were talking about Evan Mobley was the point that you were making before you flipped it back over to me.
Yeah.
Was that accurate? Yeah. So you're saying it's a win-win situation. Evan Mobley, he's either going to get drafted by the Cavaliers, then they might look to flip Jarrett Allen in a sign and trade, or they're going to stick with Jarrett Allen and then maybe Evan Mobley would fall to the Raptors. But either one of those things is promising, because if we're pursuing a big man in free agency, it's not a very stacked class this year. And that's why it's expected around the NBA there to be a lot of trades. Cody Zeller, Robin Lopez, Tice, Nerlens Noel, Enes Kanter, Rashawn Holmes, who a lot of people said maybe that would be the guy that we'd like to sign as Raptors. Well, he's 27. His stat lines aren't as promising. He doesn't have as much potential as Jarrett Allen. So I would agree with you. It sounds to me like if we're going to be aggressive as suitors for Jarrett Allen, and maybe there's a chance that puts a bit more pressure on Cleveland to sign him, all of a sudden Mobley slips to us in the 4th pick. Hey, definitely a win-win. It's starting to look a lot better now in, this upcoming couple of weeks for how we're going to figure out that 5 spot. Because right now that's the glaring hole in our roster.
Yeah, our guy Aaron Baines just wasn't cutting it this season. But the question I threw out to you before our audio's cut off is, who's the team that's picking ahead of us, right? And I think you might have mentioned in the Cleveland is the team, and there's a report a few weeks back saying that insiders believe the Cavs will trade Jarrett Allen if they land Evan Mobley in the draft. So Evan Mobley, he's projected to go to 3, but obviously if they're picking Evan Mobley, then the Raptors probably have a better chance at the Cavs not matching a big contract for Jarrett Allen, so that's a win for us and getting a proper center on the roster. We'll talk about contract as we go along, but if they're enticed by Jarrett Allen, the mutual interest, as Shams brought up, right? If they lean with Jarrett Allen, who obviously was a big piece of, I guess they didn't give much up a lot for Jarrett Allen in that James Harden deal, but was a significant part of that trade, right? If they want to keep him around and then they go in a different direction in the draft, Mobley is fallen into our hands. So that's a very much a win-win situation for the Raptors, Ryker. But the big question is he worth that big, large bag of money that he's seeking out on this in this free agency? Because $100 million for a guy averaging 13 points per game, it might not make a lot of sense, but just as him as a player right now, but he's so young. These guys, these big men, they take a long time to develop. I think you got to go for it if there's no better options on the market.
Well, that's why I went through who is available, because they're much older. They don't fit with that young developing timeline. If you're going to pay a lot of money to a guy, you might as well pay a guy who has a ton of upside, and he's giving you numbers right now that are respectable starter center in the NBA numbers. And Rudy Gobert was only averaging 17 and 15 to get $200 million. So it would, half of that $100 million obviously doesn't translate that way, but it's not unrealistic to ask for that much as a center when there's not a lot of them in today's NBA, right? It's the least complete position in the NBA. It's the hardest to get a solid NBA starter, especially with how the league is transitioning away from the traditional big man. It's forcing guys out like Andre Drummond or Montrezl Harrell, right? That they're just not mobile enough, I guess, to play and to keep up. So you'd pay the money to him if that's the best option available. And I certainly wouldn't hate it, because we talked about Jarrett Allen so much before. It only makes sense to see him become a Toronto Raptor.
Yeah, the amount of chatter we've talked about this guy, it's a good look, but he looks good in a Raptors uniform. Those photoshops we do up, Jarrett Allen just seems to fit. That chevron jersey right there. But I guess, so the $100 million, you're willing to go for it, you risk it, because that's around the level of a solid contributing center in the league, and a lot of them are overpaid, underpaid. The one name that has also been mentioned a lot this season that you brought up earlier is Richaun Holmes. I think Jarrett Allen fits our core group better than a Richaun Holmes, just because of his defensive versatility. He's more mobile. Sure, Holmes is probably a bit more finesse around the rim, is a bit better of a post scorer, but isn't as much of a lob threat, and defensively just doesn't bring the same thing Jarrett Allen does on the defensive end. So that's a big thing, and he can't really shoot either. So I like the fact that you can develop Jarrett Allen. He fits the timeline of our OGs, of our likely 4th pick, right? Of all of our young guys, Malachi Flynn, Gary Trent Jr., right? They all fit that sort of timeline. Then we have our veterans, Pascal Siakam and Fred VanVleet, to sort of guide this group with their championship experience. I really liked the fit of Jarrett Allen, and then I think he's going to grow into a positive asset anyways in the future. So you may as well bring him in. I don't think he's going to regress by any means. This is usually the market value for a center. Then if you don't like it, if someone better's on the market, you just acquire that asset while you can. And if there's mutual interest, just cash in on it.
Hey, why not? And this guy who wants a role, and the Raptors are desperate to integrate a proper big man into this roster that they've assembled. And it would improve the defense of an already sound defensive team. I like it. I hope that they do pursue it. And I hope it puts the pressure on Cleveland, because, in your scenario where we either get Jarrett Allen or Evan Mobley, I love it. Hopefully that is the case.
Yep, I would. I'd really like me some Mobes. Who would you rather have, Mobley or Jarrett Allen?
Probably Mobley. It's not a win now move. Yeah, it's not a win now move. But when you have a guy who's up there in top 3, you want to have a guy with that type of potential, right? Chris Bosh potential. I don't think Jarrett Allen's ever going to be Chris Bosh-esque. So you make that move, play the longer game, and yeah, definitely pick Mobley if he's around.
Definitely cooler hair. But I guess the final question we have to dive into cooler hair than Mobley. Chris Bosh had the cool hair. He got a braid and stuff. But the final question we have to ask is, what happens with Khem Birch if we do make this move, if we do acquire Jarrett Allen? Because I've been a guy that's been saying Khem Birch is the perfect backup big. Energy, defense, can kind of shoot the three. You love to see it. Doesn't do anything well enough to say, okay, he's a surefire top 10 center in the league, but coming off your bench, he's probably a top tier bench big man in the NBA, especially what he provided for the Toronto Raptors this season. So, would you pay that, Jarrett Allen $21 million per year at the center position as your starter, and then another 7-8 for Khem Birch if you're acquiring Jarrett Allen? Because they do similar things.
7-8 for Khem Birch would be fine. I suspect he'd probably want more like 10-12. And I don't know if he'd actually want to re-sign with the Raptors if we pick up Jarrett Allen, because he was discontent in Orlando playing off the bench and wanted a bigger role. And that's why Orlando ultimately dealt him to the Raptors.
He was deep bench. He was behind Mo Bamba and Wendell Carter at that point.
He wasn't behind Mo Bamba.
For a stretch there, at the end of the season. You
could say that he was, but Mo Bamba was like barely even playing. He was getting reserve minutes. Like he was only getting 3-4 minutes a game. Khem Birch was the backup center guy, but now that could have also been because of injuries.
And that's the direction they were going into, right? Because once they traded away Vucevic, then who was clearly the number one guy there, then they said, okay, we want Bamba and Carter to get those minutes.
That's fair. That's fair. That is the direction. So they knew the role was going to push him out. But here's the thing. You have to play Jarrett Allen 30 minutes if you're paying him $100 million. So that's only leaving like 10, 15, 20 minutes max, because you're not going to play them as the front court duo, right? You're going to have Boucher come in, or you're going to have Pascal Siakam, and you want a better scoring power forward. So I don't know if it's worth it to pay $10-12 million for your backup big. If it's Khem Birch, you could probably get a cheaper guy that would do similar things, but I don't know. Do you have a different opinion there?
See, I don't know if Khem Birch is going to command that type of money this offseason, just because the jump shot isn't there yet. So he's not considered a stretch big man, and he only really did it for the second half of a season on a tanking roster. So while you and I are bought in, we've watched every game of the Raptors and all of this, but other teams, other executives, I don't know if he upped his market value up to that level. Obviously, he was coming into the Raptors as maybe a mid-level guy, a minimum guy, and then definitely earned himself a bag for this season. So he was waived by the Orlando Magic. So that will tell you, even though I don't know if it was necessarily, I think it was a mutual waiving, if there's such a thing. But I don't know. It's going to be very interesting to follow this Toronto Raptors team as we inch closer to that NBA draft on Thursday night. So stay tuned to the Raptors Digest. We'll probably have a live going in to preview everything. Not sure if we're going live during the draft, but might have to.
We wouldn't have to wait around too long.
Yeah, might not have to. Yeah, might not. Well, definitely won't have to wait around too long. Might have to do the first 10 picks. So stay tuned to the Raptors Digest. Subscribe to the channel. It really helps us out. Check us out on Instagram, the TikTok, all that cool stuff. Check out Courtside Digest. You want that Jonas talk? You want to give a little quick take on Jonas Valanciunas going to the Pelicans?
I suspect he's going to be shipped off again. Doesn't make sense for him to play alongside Zion and Brandon Ingram, but we'll break it down over on Courtside. So go check out that video too.
For sure. You guys are the best to make it this far. Last words, Ryker?
Cheers.